Most murder cases are decided by jury, but some are decided before trial. In the case against Luigi Mangione, the real fight isn't about motive or headline. It's about a McDonald stop, a backpack search, and questioning without Miranda. And this case doesn't fall the way most people expect. Today, I'm not ruling on guilt. I'm ruling on proof and whether it survives the Constitution. Here's the factual box. Prosecutors accuse Mangione of killing United Healthcare CEO in Manhattan. According to public reporting, police later encountered him at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. They detained him, they questioned him, and they searched a backpack associated with him. That encounter matters because much of the government's evidence flows directly from it. The defense has moved to suppress both physical evidence and statement. If that motion succeeds, this case changes. From the prosecutor's view, police acted lawfully. They argue the detention was supported by reasonable suspicion tied to an active homicide investigation. They also raised public safety concerns, arguing officers could not rule out dangerous items inside the bag. As for statements, prosecutors say Mangione spoke voluntarily before being in custody, and even if something went wrong, they argue the evidence would have been found anyway. If those arguments hold, the jury will see nearly everything. Here's where the defense presses harder. Let's start with the backpack. No warrant, handcuffed, several feet away, surrounded by officers. In that posture, the defense argues, Mangione had no realistic access to a weapon. Now this defeats the search justification. Next, Miranda. The defense says Mangione was questioned for nearly 20 minutes before being advised of his rights. They argue that any statements made during that window, including giving a false name, must be excluded. Finally, pretext. They argue the forgery arrest and immediate search were used to look for murder evidence. This isn't one argument, it's a sequence. And if one step fails, everything downstream is vulnerable. Now let's cross-examine the encounter. Start with the stop. Police weren't acting on instinct alone. They were responding to a brutal homicide investigation. Mangione actually matched investigative indicators, and he allegedly provided false identifying information. Now, in this case, that matters. False identification independently escalates reasonable suspicion and justifies a continued detention. Now let's turn to the backpack, the closest call in this case. Was it still within Mangione's reach at the moment of the search, or had the scene been already stabilized? That factual detail decides, in this case, whether this was a lawful safety search or an unlawful evidentiary one. Now, let's turn to the questioning. Once Mangione was controlled and the focus narrowed, that's custody. And custody without Miranda warnings draws a hard constitutional line. Now the law. These rules don't exist to protect defendants. They exist to regulate government power. The Fourth Amendment governs stops and searches. The Fifth Amendment governs custodial interrogation. Protective searches require access-based risk. Miranda applies only to custodial interrogation. Under the totality of the circumstances, a reasonable person would understand they were in custody, even without handcuffs or at a station house. That's Miranda custody. And once interrogation began, Miranda warnings were required. Here's how this motion should be decided. The McDonald's detention was supported by reasonable suspicions, particularly given the nature of the crime and the false identification. That stop was lawful. Now, the backpack search is a closer call, but likely survived. The question is objective. Given the uncertainty and proximity of the moment of the search, a judge could reasonably uphold it as a limited safety-based search. That evidence likely stays. The questioning is different. This did not remain a routine stop. Once police moved past identification, surrounded Mangione, and exercised clear control over his movement, the encounter took on a custodial character. Under the totality of the circumstances, a reasonable person would understand they were in custody, even without handcuffs or at a station house. That's Miranda custody. And once interrogation began, Miranda warnings were required. So any statements obtained beyond administrative questions before those warnings should be suppressed. This ruling does not decide guilt. It decides what evidence the jury is allowed to hear. And in a criminal court, that distinction controls everything. Thanks for watching. If you want tight legal analysis without the fluff, please subscribe. And for more detailed coverage, turn to crimesdigest.com. And always remember, the truth matters, and so does reasonable doubt. See you in the next case.